Mike, I think this changing Columbus Day to Juneteenth is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And where does it stop? I mean, they're tearing down statues, changing names of schools, and military bases. Where does it stop?
It's a reasonable question. You're allowed to ask it, I think. At least you used to be. This used to be America, where we could have conversations, we could have exchanges, we could have disagreement, and not expect to be dragged by the mob, attacked. Saw some video last night. Some woman had some dispute with neighbors over a stone patio being built in their yard. They recorded her. She happened to be white. They happened to be black. It got turned into a racial thing. And before you know it, she had hundreds of protesters in front of her door protesting her racism because it seemed to me like she's a nosy neighbor that didn't think the other neighbors were allowed to build a stone patio where they built them. But immediately she was declared a racist. Over at PragerU, my friend Dennis Prager has a pretty remarkable site, PragerU. The New York Times, evidently, is now setting its sights on Mount Rushmore. We knew this was coming. I'm not kidding you. If I announced to you, breaking news, a discussion underway to tear down the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., you know you wouldn't be surprised, right? You wouldn't be surprised. Again, here was the exchange I had with a dear friend who doesn't agree with me on a lot of stuff or political stuff. What's Christopher Columbus got to do with George Floyd's death? Don't you know what a bad guy he was? So now the New York Times is reporting how Mount Rushmore was built on land that belonged to the Lakota tribe and sculpted by a man who had strong bonds with the Ku Klux Klan. It features the faces of 2 U.S. presidents who were slaveholders. That's an actual tweet from the New York Times. Now, PragerU points out that the same New York Times, which has a storied history, its founding editor was a guy named Henry Jarvis Raymond. In 1851, the New York Times founding editor published an editorial in which he supported a slave owner's legal right to recover his escaped slaves. So PragerU had an interesting question to the New York Times. Will you guys also be canceling yourselves since you want everything canceled? How far does this go? Chris, you're first up on the Mike Gallagher Show. How are you, Chris?
Good. I thought it was ironic that October 12th this year falls on a Monday. And, of course, October 12th was the day that historically Christopher Columbus discovered America, which is the original Christopher Columbus, the real reason why it's a holiday.
I honestly, I mean, really, Chris, you got to help me here. You got to tell me what Christopher Columbus has to do with the racial dialogue that has emerged after the killing of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis. Please connect it for me.
Well, I can. I mean, I guess I'm just pointing out that it's so ironic that
yeah.
This year that they're going to eliminate it, it's almost like they're eliminating America because October 12th is on the day that we're going to be celebrating, the holiday.
I know. I mean, when people say that this isn't about racial progress, it's about dismantling America, I don't know. I don't have a good argument for that. I wish I could. I wish I did. Let's have a conversation. Juneteenth, the day that the slaves were emancipated. How much more who would disagree with celebrating such a historic achievement that the slaves were emancipated? Oh, but wait, Abraham Lincoln's statue has to come down, the great emancipator, because there's a statue somewhere of a slave that's below him. I guess as I understand it, the point of the sculpture, the statue, was to signify the shackles being broken from a slave and the slave rising and emerging as a real human being, like he always should have been. No, the slave is in a subservient pose. Tear the whole thing down. Burn it all down.